joined by Michelle Gilbert. She's the Principal Cloud Solution Architect for Microsoft, focused on Copilot for Microsoft 365. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And of course, we all know you from the Microsoft MVP community. So you used to be a Microsoft MVP. And why don't you just give our listeners a bit of background? I know you have a ton of expertise with Microsoft all up, but specifically SharePoint and Copilot. So why don't you just give us a little introduction about yourself?
All right, that sounds great. First off, thanks for having me. You guys are fantastic. I follow you quite a bit. My background is being a SharePoint admin since probably 2003 of SharePoint Moss days as well. And I moved up in the rank of being a global admin at different organizations in different industries, then moved into being a solution architect for M365. I moved it over to Microsoft and became a Microsoft Teams TS, which really means all things Teams, technical specialist. And recently, with the advent of Copilot for M365, became a cloud solution architect. My focus has been on our early access program customers and showing them the value and teaching them all the technical capabilities within Copilot.
Fantastic. Well, we're excited to talk to you today because, of course, no conversation with Microsoft is complete without talking about Copilot. And I know you've had, significant field experience being out there, helping customers deploy it, use it, get value from it. So, one of the things when we look at Copilot, deploying it, there's this whole assessment, preparation, getting ready for it. And one of the big challenges with preparing for Copilot, of course, is making sure you have good data governance. Can you speak to maybe some of the challenges there and some of the things you've seen from the field that companies do to properly prepare for the deployment of Copilot?
Yes, we think about it in two ways. When you are looking at Copilot and readying your organization, you think of one, user enablement. But the second one in parallel is really around technical enablement and being technically ready. And what does that mean? That really means how mature are you in your M365 tenant? So that could be, do you have DLP in place? Do you have sensitivity labels in place? Are they manual? Are they automatic? How good is your governance, your M365 group lifecycle management, as well as your SharePoint permission models? And how clean is your data? I think that's probably the first and foremost thing any customer that I've worked with is looking at as they are deploying in their pilot waves and then out larger to their cohorts.
And do you find like customers, you hear a lot about permissions, making sure that your permissions are properly scoped, meaning that users only have access to what they need to have access to. From that perspective, of course, there's a few things we could do, but you find customers generally engage in like a reporting process activity on permissions all up and then sort of an attestation workflow to make sure that those permissions are cleaned up? Or I don't know, what do you see out in the field there?
Yeah, I see customers doing their SharePoint permission assessments. You can find that in the SharePoint Advanced Management and in the admin centers. But I do also like to pause and explain that if they are using search today, then they are already exposing the data. Copilot for M365 displays it differently in the endpoints like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, in your Teams app, the Copilot app, and so forth. The data is just displayed in a different way. So if you are already allowing search today, then you are already exposing that data the way that you have it governed. So right now is a great time to think about re-governing the data if it isn't addressing the way that you want to protect it.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you'll want to engage in that before you even start a Copilot POC, right? Like you want to your point, make sure you clean that up now. I'm curious, do you see many customers use Purview in this whole data governance scenario with Copilot, or is that sort of something different that's off their radar right now?
Yeah, certainly. I think they're leveraging Purview They're putting together their compliance for their conditional access to their data. I mean, I think everything that they can do to govern their data, they should be doing. I like to think of the way that search works. There's two types of indexes that we do. The first one we call keyword or lexical index, meaning when you upload data, you are then having that go into that type of index to be retrieved by a keyword or phrase of keywords. The second way, as you upload, we're also putting together what's called a semantic index. So your data is going into two places. Now, what that means is that you're still using the same search architecture. So as you either leverage search or you're leveraging Copilot, however you have governed your data already, is the way that it will be displayed. So the risk that you have today doesn't change when you're using Copilot, but it's always a really good time to start looking at governance if you're not looking at purview and you're not looking at how you're governing your data.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
So Michelle, I was wondering, there's obviously a lot of customers are sort of dipping their toe in AI and Copilot and stuff. And so what do you see sort of the major concerns of organizations about not lighting it up, like, right off the bat? I know we're talking about about the data governance and stuff like that, but sort of like, where have you seen sort of the roadblocks, and like how do you try and get them past sort of that roadblock in order to get them to start sort of their adoption journey, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, Habib. I would say one of the first things is education. Most companies I'm seeing today are developing an AI council that is addressing all of the different approaches or tools that the organization is bringing into their environment. First and foremost, I think having a governing body is really helpful. I think second is also having education around what is generative AI at work and how will it help the business, and proving out the value of will it help the business. I think also it's important that you start to understand the way that AI is going to help you is more around with your data and being able to answer questions for you, being able to summarize for you, being able to create content for you. And that type of user experience journey and understanding those capabilities and the behavior change that you're going to have in interacting with your data takes time. And so there is a change management piece. I think that's really important. But to answer you very specifically, I think right now is a great time to just start educating your organization, whether that's required training. I think there are also different features that you may have not have rolled out. I'd say one of the biggest ones is that not all companies have rolled out transcription. So because of that, that is one of the features in Copilot for M365 in a Teams meeting, that you can use Copilot to help address things like meeting recap, or what did this person say, or what were the action items of a meeting. If you do not have transcription enabled, therefore you're not able to leverage that. Now, one of the solutions that we came up with, which was Copilot Copilot only mode, I'm sorry, that when you are in a Teams meeting, you can have that recording only during the meeting. And then, of course, when you're not in that meeting any longer, or the meeting ends, that recording goes away. Now, that helps some organizations, but I think it's going back to what are the policies that you have in place inside of Teams that may prevent you from utilizing all the tools.
And do you see any challenges from multinational or geographically dispersed organization where obviously where the Copilot processing is being done to where the country that they're sort of generating the prompts from as well? Are there any concerns in sort of that area?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of discussion right now as different organizations are rolling into this multi-geo, or trying to put their pilot groups or roll out to the next deployment or cohort in different regional areas or geographic areas. Now, what we did at Microsoft is that we rolled it out within Microsoft and it took 3 months. Now, that wasn't lucky, right? That was a lot of planning, and that was us building our relationship with our workers' councils in Europe, in APAC, in all over the regions that we were going to deploy to first one, educate. This is what it is. This is what we hold. This is where we hold it. I think all of those things architecturally are super important. This is how long we retain. This is what we retain. This is how you can discover it. All those pieces really need to be known, especially if there's certain needs inside of the, different areas. So I think to address that, I think you have to first know what are you restricting and why, and what do they know that they don't, or what do they know that you need to still continue the education on and learn those blockers.
Michelle, I have a couple questions. What is your
Sure.
what is your kind of top 5 favorite or couple favorites customer scenarios using Copilot?
That's a great question. I'd say a few of my scenarios are going to be one. Probably the most recent is performance reviews. To me, that's absolutely my favorite. I have a customer right now who they just went through their quarterly performance reviews. They leveraged Copilot. How they were able to do that is they had either a Word document that they've highlighted in the last quarter of their um, reports, and in there they had maybe the highlights for the quarter, and then ask Copilot to summarize their performance based on these. There's many other things that you can do in inside of like a kudos or the capability to give reviews to colleagues. That's probably one of the most recent ones. I've also seen onboarding, leveraging Copilot to help you onboard, doing that in a way of being able to use natural language to talk to an intranet, which has been pretty incredible. Certain tasks or flights that they have to go do as a new hire. That's I think also super amazing. I think there's a ton of use cases out there, but I think it's like figuring out what will work individually for your industry and for your role is where I think the true value comes from. But for me personally, I was just at a conference all last week. So of course, who do I go to? I go to Copilot to say, summarize my latest emails, my Teams chats, my channels over the last 7 days. And then I actually use piping and say, pipe it into these columns. So think back of like SQL days where you could say select all and you could have it do all these amazing things to deliver that data to you. Copilot does the same thing. So I know I'm keep learning from others, but truly like I would say use it, the way that you think of how you want to see data and tell it to give that to you. So those are the few of my favorites right now.
Those are some interesting scenarios, like pipe it and then maybe create a to-do item or something like that based on those items. That'd be cool. Couple questions. So for customers that may have just been hoarding data in SharePoint and OneDrive, or have a lot of SharePoint sites that they haven't maybe applied the proper governance to, how do they start with getting Copilot in, maybe restricting the search, or how what are some steps that they can start at least playing with Copilot as a kind of in parallel work on their governance?
Yeah, great question. I think to get started when you're not feeling great about your own SharePoint environment and you have too much maybe site sprawl or too many SharePoint sites and you don't have a lot of permission over that, I would first look at, are you already restricting that data from search? If you are, and you can do that in the SharePoint site itself, if you are, when you restrict it from search, you're already restricting that data from Copilot. So just know that going into it, your restrictions that you put in place are already adhered to. The second thing, I would start doing some analysis over the SharePoint sites or the data that you have today. Is it old? Is it stale? Is it being leveraged? Is it being used? Certainly you can do that by looking at SharePoint, but you have team sites that are also SharePoint enabled. And so looking at both those activities, is really, really valuable. But if you have a certain type of data, let's just say you've already enabled sensitivity labels and you want to block a certain group, certainly you could go ahead and take a look at what is all highly confidential, let's say, and you can use restricted site search, or restricted RSS is what we call it, and select the sites that have that confidential data, or that you're not really aware or understand what type of data that is because you haven't had the amount of analysis that you'd hope for. You can leverage that by basically blacklisting that from being leveraged in Copilot. So that's some things, and I call that kind of a Band-Aid, to be honest, because you want to look at all of your data, right? You want to know what your data is. You want to have it classified. You want to have the right permission model in place. But that's kind of your Band-Aid to say, right now, I want to leverage Copilot. This is a sensitive area for me. And let's go put a Band-Aid over it, park it. We'll come back to it. We'll add the governance, and then we'll bring that back into the fold with the right access in place.
What if someone deployed Copilot before putting the Band-Aid in, and then they go to deploy the Band-Aid? How long before Copilot forgets the data, or the data is removed from its kind of query?
Great question. Much like search, right? You remove your data out of SharePoint, it's the same amount of time. So I'm not positive exactly the time period. It's pretty quick. Just kind of like you upload a document, then you do a search on it. It may be a little lag by a few minutes before search indexes and then returns that result. The opposite is true when you delete.
Right, thank you.
That's true. Those are some really great points, Michelle. And I think we'll flip it over to some of the orgs that have actually turned on Copilot. And I mean, anecdotally, what I'm seeing as well is kind of orgs fighting for who wants to host the meeting, because as you know, if I'm hosting a meeting, and I have Copilot, I'd like to have that data so that I can use Copilot. But if my customers host the meeting, then I can't leverage Copilot. So, this topic's come up a bit, and it's an interesting one. And I don't know that there's an easy answer to this. And I don't know, I'm just curious if you've had customers reach out and ask you the same question, and see in terms of where might we see this go, and is it something Microsoft's looking at potentially addressing in the future?
Yeah, great question, Dino. And I've had customers that they didn't have some of their organizers that were running the meeting have Copilot, and I raised my hand and said, do you mind if I be the host of these meetings going forward? That way we can leverage Copilot. And the answer has always been yes. Now, what that means is that I have the ability to do transcription. That's the requirement for Copilot for M365. And what's also interesting is that Copilot is enforcing someone to have a new role in a Teams meeting, which is, I'm the one who has a Copilot license and the meeting is from my organization. So I am now responsible for interacting with Copilot and then capturing that and then putting it into the chat. And this is either during the meeting, because maybe it's a time boxed for only during the meeting, but if it's transcription is available, Copilot is enabled before, during, and after the meeting, then of course you still have to say, okay, I'm going to be in that role, copy whatever the questions maybe people might have about it. Are there any action items for me? Were there any decisions made? What was the sentiment of the meeting? My favorite is were there any technical issues in the meeting? Which is funny, because if I ask Copilot, a lot of the times it says Michelle had a problem sharing her screen. I don't know why this comes up, but I do ask Copilot, like, did I have any problems in this meeting? But I think you're onto something, which is it's creating a new role of a meeting organizer. And when developing a relationship with a customer or with a vendor discussing who has Copilot and who would then be the meeting organizer hosting the meeting going forward. So I don't have any answers that how Microsoft's addressing. I just know how personally I'm seeing customers say, why don't you host it? This person's not licensed, or we have transcriptions turned off, but we only allow it, Copilot during the meeting. So a lot of times I just raise my hand and say, give me your questions, I'll put it in there, and then I'll put it in chat. That way everybody can see it if they missed the meeting or they were multitasking or whatnot. So at least they capture, a little bit of it. I wish there was a way. I think you might be alluding to that you would just know in the meeting, and it maybe even a drop down that said, this meeting is being hosted by this tenant, and therefore, raise your hand if you want the Copilot role, right? That doesn't exist, but having somebody do those questions for you and then give you that response.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. I mean, because it's not as prevalent now, but I think as Copilot gets deployed, I think we're going to see this kind of fight to have. No, I want to host a meeting, and then the company go back and forth. So it's interesting. I'm even seeing it within company boundaries, where we all, some people have Copilot and others don't. But for example, project managers want to now record and host the meetings so that they have that data, and then they can summarize the data. And sometimes they don't even attend the meeting, and that's a different issue. That goes back to your education, empowering users and instructing them to say, look, you can attend a meeting. It is a good tool, but you might want to follow up with the people that were in just to make sure that everything is 100% accurate as well. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that's going to unfold for sure.
Yeah, great question. I totally agree. I think, Dina, that it's a matter of who is licensed. It's almost like a little form in the beginning. Who's hosting? Who is licensed? And here are the questions that I want to have answered. And this is, to me, I think just a short issue. I think as you're completely deploying your organization, then it will probably go away. But you'll probably always have, no, really, I want to be the organizer, the hosting the meeting. No, really, no, I do. So you might have some battle, but I think sharing that information is really key in the chats, and then people don't miss that.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, Michelle, I want to touch on something that I'm sort of excited about. It was announced at Microsoft Build 2024. Based on my own use of Copilot and other AI bot type technologies, I have two issues. One, it's always me having to prompt to get value out of the AI. And then secondly, there's this whole business of prompting, and you need to get the prompt right and really good to get accurate results. And I know Microsoft has some really good guidance on this, and they even have Copilot Labs, which can help you generate the right prompt for what you're looking for. But I see at Build they released this concept of Copilot agents, which I think can be built in Microsoft Copilot Studio. But the idea of these agents is they act autonomously to carry out tasks. But the bigger thing I see is that they can actually react on your behalf. For example, when an email arrives, the Copilot can look up the sender's details, the previous communication, and then use the generative AI to recommend an appropriate chain of actions for you to take. I'll get your thoughts on that in terms of what you see out in the field.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think you're talking about a lot of things. I feel like this is just the evolution of AI at Microsoft, from intelligent recap that we were doing inside of Teams with Teams Premium. I think now also Copilot and the integration with our new Teams generating meeting notes for you, leveraging Loop, and now Outlook. So I feel like it's the next wave and the next stage of what we're doing in terms of trying to help end users see the value, but also have automation provide that efficiency for you. And I know, early on, we didn't even have a prompt library. So you had to kind of make it up as you went. And then we brought in those suggested prompts. And then we brought in the Copilot Lab, like you mentioned, the prompt library. I think we're just getting started. The prompt library being added into actually every product and every feature is really important. So you can get started. And then the future being you have a bank of different prompts that you can try within your organization. You can bookmark them and share them and have a database really of what the prompts are that are maybe more organizational specific. I just don't think we're done. I think we're trying to figure out the best ways that organizations will leverage and utilize a tool without having to do some of the bigger essential ingredients of a good prompt, which that's something that I really love to talk about. But we're bringing that into the products, and we're just going to continue there. Like you said with build, I can only imagine there's going to be more announcements as we try to just make the product easier for you to use by clicking a few buttons than trying to figure it out on your own. But I think we're in the early stages of that.
Yeah, I would agree. It feels like the first inning, and this is the pace of innovation and the value it provides is only going to get bigger and better. So
Yeah.
It's fantastic. All right. Well, we've somehow talked already for like 30, 35 minutes. So that was fantastic, Michelle. I want to really thank you for coming on and giving us your experiences from the field, and look forward to having you on in the future and seeing probably we'll have a lot more field experience by then in terms of companies or organizations really leveraging this technology in their businesses.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. I love being on this show. You guys are, well, I think I'm considered a glorified Canadian, being just right south of you in Minnesota.
South Canada. You're in South Canada, Michelle. That's
yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm in South Canada.
Get enough snow so you can't.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. Love to be back on anytime too.
Sounds good.